Press the bell icon on YouTube and don't miss another update.
Namaste and welcome to this 10 p.m. show today. And we have you all been very eagerly waiting for him. We've got Dr. Bill Warner with us today. Welcome, Dr. Warner.
I'm happy to be here because we're going to talk about my favorite subject, political Islam.
Oh, yes. I take you into your subject right away. And my question is, the opening question, is that this is known as the religion of Islam, but you call it political Islam. Why?
Well, it's an interesting thing to talk about. Most people, if you ask them, say that Islam is a religion based on the Quran, but it's not a religion and it's not based on the Quran. Muslims themselves say that Islam is a complete way of life, a total life system. It tells you how to have sex. It tells you how to go to the bathroom. It tells you how to have children. It tells you how to marry. It tells you how to have insurance. You don't. And everything else. So to call it a religion is too small. And besides that, like I say, the Muslims that I know say that it is a complete way of life, a complete philosophy. And the other thing is, it's not only based on the Quran, because if you read the Quran and you know what Islam is, you notice several things that are unusual. I'm assuming now that you put the Quran in the right time order and collected things together, but that's to the aside. So there's not enough information in the Quran to practice the religion of Islam. For instance, it says pray. Actually, it says pray 3 times a day, but the Sunnah calls for prayer 5 times a day. But the problem is that you cannot be a Muslim by just what's based on the Quran. The way out of this is simple. There are 89 verses. And by the way, you can tell from the way I talk, I'm a scientist. I love to measure things. There are 89 verses which say that Muhammad is the perfect guide to life. He's what I call the divine human prototype. He's exactly how a person should live their life, how they should speak. And so he is, if you will, the perfect pattern to be a human being. So, but how do we know about Muhammad? Well, we find out about Muhammad because by reading his life, the Sirah, the biography, and the Hadith, his traditions. So Islam is based on Quran, Sirah, Hadith, not just the Quran. And this is good news because, for one thing, if you want to learn about Islam, the place you start is you don't start off reading about the Quran, you start out reading about the life of Muhammad. The reason is simple. When you read the life of Muhammad, you understand the whole picture. And it gives you, and the other thing is you can remember a story, and his life is an incredible story. So we're dealing with Muhammad, the Sunnah, the perfect path, and the Quran. So, but now then, once we understand what we're dealing with, that is, we can now put our arms around Islam. We are containing it within Quran, Sirah, Hadith, so we can actually hold the whole doctrine in one hand. So this is good news because most people think that you can't understand Islam no matter what you do. But Islam actually, once you take the Quran, the Sirah, and the Hadith and edit them correctly, are very easy to read. So we're now left with the question, why political Islam? Well, once you know you're reading Quran, Sirah, Hadith, something strikes you immediately, particularly in the Sirah. Most of it is not about how to be a Muslim. Most of it is about what to do to the kafir, the non-Muslim. So this is unusual. For instance, if you read Buddhist sutras, it's about how to be a Buddhist. It's not about condemning non-Buddhists. But the Quran is filled with hatred towards the non-believer, the kafirs, I call it. That's the actual word the Quran uses for us. So we're dealing with the kafir is what's peculiar about it, because it is mostly about a non-believer. If you take all the words in the Quran, the Sirah, and the Hadith and add them up, and then divide them into the parts that deal with the kafir and the parts that deal with religion, you find out that there's 51% of the text is devoted to the non-believer. This is what I call political Islam, and that is the only part of Islam that I care about. Think about it. I don't care anything at all about the religion. I mean, good, bad, or indifferent. I just have no interest in the religion of Islam. But I do have a big interest in political Islam because it talks about me. Let me give you an example of how to sort these out. In the United States now, on Fridays, in some cities where they're large enough, Muslims will commandeer the streets and lead public prayer. And you say, well, that's a religious act. The prayer is a religious act. Commandeering the street is a political action. You see the difference? So what I'm concerned about is in public prayer is not what they pray to God or Allah or whoever else. I just simply don't care. But I do care about the fact that I can't drive down the street while they're praying. Because if I did that and you did that, we would have policemen write us a ticket and remove us from the street. But if Muslims do it, they get a free pass. So I want you to see that something is political when it affects us. Now, there are parts about Islam that deal only with Muslims and yet can still wind up dealing with us. For instance, in the United States, it is illegal to beat your wife. But according to the Sharia, it is possible to beat your wife. So therefore, although we might say, well, I don't care if a Muslim male beats his Muslim wife, I do if they do it in the United States because it violates our laws. As a matter of fact, political Islam violates our constitution as well. So therefore, we see what's interesting about Islam is the part that impacts us. I don't care about what impacts anybody on Judgment Day. As a matter of fact, I'm not so sure about the Judgment Day idea. The other reason is that we can talk about politics. Now, in the United States, we have a very strong constitution which guarantees religious freedom. And soon after 9/11, and by the way, 9/11 I predicted. I didn't predict it would be on the 9th on September 11th. I just predicted that we would be attacked. As a matter of fact, after we were attacked, my phone began to ring with people calling me. I got 12 calls that day saying, how did you know we were going to be attacked? I said, simple. I read the playbook. And the playbook is Quran, Sirah, Hadith. And then I read the history of Islam. Because once you understand the doctrine of political Islam and look at its history, it's very easy to predict the future. Why? They just keep doing the same thing. And why don't they change it? Because it keeps working. It works. As in America, we say, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So it works just fine. We're seeing more and more Muslims elected into political office, and people don't know what to do. And my answer to what to do about political Islam is very simple. Study and know Islam, because it is astounding to find how little people know about Islam. Let me give you an example. One of my students is a retired FBI agent. He was talking with some young FBI agents who are currently serving, and he said, would you like to learn about political Islam? And they said, no, we don't want to know anything about political Islam. Why is that? Because if we mention Islam, we'll get in trouble. So here we have the FBI, which is supposed to handle internal security in the United States, doesn't even know anything about what Islam is. That's the reason they deal with terrorism, not jihadists, because you can be a terrorism for any reason, but a jihadist has a plan that's 1,400 years old and he's working it. So therefore, political Islam is what we want to deal with, because political Islam is what will damage us. How a person prays doesn't affect me one way or the other. So therefore, political Islam is the part of Islam we want to deal with because it's the part that deals with us. And remember this, the majority of Islam is based on the political part. So that's briefly where I am with political Islam and why I think it's the important thing to study. My books, for instance, deal with the political side of it. I have a book of Hadith called The Political Traditions of Muhammad, and all these Hadith deal with us. I don't give you the Hadith that deal with prayer because I'm not interested in prayer. I don't give you the part about family law. Instead, what I talk about is what affects us. So political Islam is the part we need to know and study, and we cannot defeat political Islam without knowing political Islam. We have generals here in the United States who've never read the first book on it. We have people in the State Department that don't know there's a doctrine of treaties, yet they sit down and want to make treaties with Muslims. The treaty laws are political laws. So therefore, we want to get away from discussing the religion of Islam, which is of no interest, and we want to go to studying the politics of Islam, which affect us on a daily basis.
Okay, so that was an excellent exposition on why you deal with political Islam only, and religion of Islam can be, in fact, it's a very small part. Even the Quran is a very small part. I think you actually laid it out in your book that Quran is just 14% of the entire
Yes.
corpus of the Sharia law.
So I think it's interesting that if you look at the Quran, Sirah, Hadith, 14% of it is about Allah, 86% about it is about Muhammad. This tells us something. It tells us a lot. It tells us we ought to learn about Muhammad and forget about Allah.
Quite right. In fact, one of our very good friend, he challenges the Muslims, saying that, okay, uh, it's not enough that you say Allah. It's not enough because you cannot be a Muslim unless you also say at the same time, you say La ilaha illallah, but at the same time, unless you say that Muhammadur Rasulullah, then your faith is not complete. So that
Correct.
shows.
Correct. By the way, I find it interesting. I've discussed Islam a lot with Muslims. It is astounding how little they know about Islam. Now, occasionally you get some Muslim Brotherhood type who's quite good or an imam, but the average Muslim knows very little about Islam at all. As a matter of fact, Christians who've tried to convert Muslims have discovered that the way to convert a Muslim is you do not talk to him about your religion of Christianity. Instead, you talk to them about what the religion of Islam is. And you go through and you explain to them things that they just simply don't know about. So you need to know political Islam. And by the way, there's another reason you need to know political Islam. I'm an intellectual. It's very interesting. It's curious because it has, let me give you an example. I'm a scientist. If two things, we're taught with Aristotelian logic, if two things contradict each other, at least one of them is false. Now they may both be false, but if they contradict each other, at least one of them is. But Islam is not based on that. In the Quran, when you study it, the early Quran preaches one doctrine, and the latter Quran teaches another doctrine. And the latter doctrine trumps or cancels the earlier doctrine. So, but they're both true. You can talk about the peaceful part of Islam if you want to, or you can talk about the war part of Islam. Even though they contradict each other, they're both true simultaneously. We can see this in the life of Muhammad. He preached the doctrine of Islam for 13 years in Mecca and converted 150 people. He moved to Medina at the insistence of the Meccans, where he became a politician and a jihadist, and the Sirah lays this out very clearly. And when he died, every Arab on the peninsula we now call the Arabian Peninsula was a Muslim. So we see here there's two Muhammads. There is Muhammad, the religion of peace. That's true and accurate. Then there's Muhammad, the jihadist. That's true and accurate. But wait a minute, those contradict each other. Doesn't matter. They're both true. They're like having hot water and cold water to sink. You can get either one you want. Just turn the knob. So Islam contains dualism. Its ethics are dualistic. This is the key divider between Islam and other systems. So anyway, that's just a little aside there about how we want to deal with the politics of Islam and to understand that it's the part that impacts us and that it's contradictory. Here's what happens with the contradictions. People say, well, I know this Muslim is a really nice person. First off, Muslims don't create Islam. Islam creates Muslims. I don't care how many Muslims say something. It doesn't matter whatsoever at all. All that counts is what Muhammad said and what Allah said. So I find it fascinating to study a system of thought. Its ethics are dualistic. How you treat a person is based on who they are. In the United States, we have a saying that the golden rule, treat others as you would be treated yourself. But there is no golden rule in Islam. It's dualistic. If you're another Muslim, you're to be treated like a brother and a sister. But if you're treated like a kafir, non-Muslim, you can be lied to, deceived, and hated. So, and also there's 13 verses in the Quran that say that a Muslim is never the true friend of a kafir. So we see here this dualism works all throughout the doctrine.
As you said initially, that you have to know the playbook the three books, all the three together. In fact, even if you don't know the first one, it doesn't matter, like the Quran. But you need to know the rest of the 86%, the 70% hadith, and the 16% of Sirah, or as they call it, Sirat-e Rasulullah, or Sirat-e Nabwi, as they call it here. So also you need to know the Islamic history, as you said, and if you put them together, then you know that the political nature of Islam has always worked for them, and it is still working for them. And the major reason is that we are not trying to learn about them. We are not trying to research even the basics. So that is something that needs to be remedied. Now let's move to the books that you've written, and I find it very fascinating. You have let's talk about the two major series that you've written. Of course, the first one is about the three books. That is what the Islamic trilogy. So, would you like to say something about the Islamic trilogy, and then I will come to the more interesting series.
Yes. Well, I call it the trilogy because I'm not a believer. That is, I do not believe there is a God, Allah, and I think Muhammad, if he existed, was confused. So therefore, I'm not a Muslim at all in any way. What I want to do is to study the actual doctrine. Let's go back to the fact that I'm a scientist. When you're a scientist, once you know the basic laws and rules, you can solve any problem. For instance, once you understand Newton's laws of motion, you can calculate the position of Mars at any time. You don't need to memorize it. You just need to know the three laws. In the same way, what I wanted to do is to make Islam clear and easy to understand based on its basic principles. So in doing the Quran, the first thing I did was to make it readable. I read the Quran in about 10 different versions and decided that what needed to happen was, first off, the Quran I have several Qurans in the desk here, and they all are the conventional order in which there is no time. In my Quran, everything's in the right time sequence. That is, as you turn the page, you go forward in time. The other thing that I do that makes my Quran so readable is I take the life of Muhammad and give it context. I integrate it with the Quran. Let me give you an example. When you're reading the Quran, the one you buy at the bookstore, and it says, there's a verse which says it was okay to burn the palm trees, you go, palm trees? Who's talking about palm trees? Whose palm trees are these? Why were they burned? Why are we talking about this? But if you were an Arab of the day, you would know that Muhammad had attacked the Jews earlier, 2 weeks ago, and he could not defeat them. So they were date palm farmers, and he cut down their date palms and burned them. Well, this violates Arab war law. And so the Arabs of the day said, you're a war criminal. Well, therefore, they knew what the verse meant, that it was okay to burn the palm trees. In my book, what you do is you read the life of Muhammad and integrated with the Quran, and as a result, you know what's going on. So when you read the verse that it was okay to burn the palm trees, you've just read the part in his life in which exactly what he did. So therefore, my Quran is easy to read because it's in the right time order. It has the context of Muhammad's life. And also taking correct, the Quran is so repetitive. There are 38 references to Moses, and I think there's 32 to Noah. And when you read it, it's just exhausting. So what I do is I collect all the stuff about Moses and put it in the same place, all the stuff about Noah and David. So therefore, I group things and according to the category they're in. So my Quran is categorized, has context, and is easy to read and understand. Now then, every single word of the Quran is in my simple Quran. So I'm not leaving anything out. Nor is it confusing when Muhammad speaks and Allah speaks, because they're in different fonts. So therefore, my Quran can be picked up and read, and it becomes an epic novel. Well, not a novel, an epic book. Starts off with a prayer and a hymn to God and ends with political domination of the world. So that's my Quran. And what I did with the Sirah was I didn't write a biography. Instead, I took the original Sirah, which has index marks on the margin, And I reference each paragraph in my Life of Muhammad is referenced to the original. So therefore, if you're reading my Life of Muhammad or Muhammad and the Unbelievers, I wrote 2 books about him. You know exactly what you're talking about. So therefore, I've made the Quran easy to understand. I've taken the Life of Muhammad and made it easy to understand because it references the original Sirah. I don't try to write a biography. I just try to take the Sirah and make it easy to read. And when it comes to the political traditions of Muhammad and the Hadith, which are 2 books, I only write about the part of Islam that deals with us. So therefore, my books deal with us. They're easy to read. And anytime in one of my books you say, I don't believe that, it has an index in the margin so that you can go look it up and see it for yourself. So therefore, my books are based on, as it were, studying the laws of Islam and making it simple and easy to understand. And once you do all this, by the way, it's categorically clear that we're in trouble. Why are we in trouble? Well, let's go back to Muhammad. His success came from jihad. And we're having jihad today. Someone died today in Africa or in the Middle East because of Muhammad. Muhammad was the greatest warrior who ever lived. Today, no one dies for Napoleon, no one dies for Caesar, no one dies for anyone, except someone died today for Muhammad. Sorry. So therefore, we want to study the doctrine of Islam so that we can become our own expert. My expert is Muhammad and Allah. So therefore, no matter how long you've been a Muslim, if you say something that contradicts Muhammad or Allah, you're wrong. If I say something that agrees with Muhammad or Allah, then I'm correct. So I teach people to reason from basic fundamental laws. This makes it easy to understand, and therefore you become your own expert. You don't need to listen to the Muslim who's talking to you at work because you've already listened to Muhammad and Allah. I like to say that my teachers are Dr. Muhammad and Professor Allah. But we need to know the basics, the fundamentals. And it's interesting because I've made it easy to read. It's like a dramatic novel.
Yes, that's very, very interesting. In fact, when I read your 2-hour books, the 3 2-hour books that you've written, I think that comes from the other series that is called A Taste of Islam. That you've given a taste of Islam to everyone who is affected by Islam. So, for instance, let's introduce our viewers to your series, what is called The Taste of Islam. So who are the people who are getting this taste of Islam? One, that is. And the second, let's talk about the interesting categories that you brought on. Like, for instance, women.
Yes. Well, I have a whole book according to the doctrine of women because I was raised by my mother and my grandmother, and I have 2 daughters and 3 granddaughters. I love women. I mean, I just say that in the point of view of I love women, period. I'm not just in any sexual sense of the word. I mean, just as people. And when I found the cruelty of Islam towards women to be beyond control. For instance, I'm going to give you an example of my method. Muhammad married Aisha, who was his favorite wife, at 6 and consummated the marriage at age 9. Well, this, I think, is the wrong thing because I do not believe in child brides. Therefore, I oppose it. But the only reason I can oppose it is it so that people can see that it is the way of Islam. Having a child bride is quite common. I know a woman who was married to a 52-year-old man when she was 14. Now, what do those 2 have in common? So I wanted people to see that the reason that women get beat in Islam is there's a verse, Surah 4, women 24. It gives women the right for their husbands to beat them. The Hadith has cases in which one of my favorite Hadiths is, never ask a man why he beats his wife. Well, I hate that. And I want people to know that it was Muhammad who said that, so that when a Muslim beats his wife, he's not breaking God's law. Muhammad beat his wife, so you can beat your wife. So that's one of the things. Women, I also do one on Christians and Jews. I do one. My most interesting one, I think, is the doctrine of slavery. It turns out that no one knows the history of slavery. And no one wants to even know about it. In the United States, slavery is considered something that happened only for 200 years when the evil white man on wooden ships went to Africa, captured Africans and brought them back. That is not what happened. The doctrine of slavery means that Muhammad had slaves. He had white slaves, black slaves, female slaves, sex slaves, Arab slaves. He had all kinds of slaves. I find it interesting that the language of Arabic has more words for slave in it than any other language in the world. So the way the black Africans came to America was the man on the wooden ship sailed into a harbor where a jihadist had the slaves in pens, and there were bills of sale and cash was transacted. So, therefore, I wrote a book on slavery, the Islamic doctrine of slavery, because people need to understand that slavery is not an accident, and slavery is still going on today in Africa. And what's interesting is that Black Americans don't want to know about it. They do not want to know at all about Muhammad, the slave trader. It's interesting, we had a famous sports athlete called Muhammad Ali, but his first name was Cassius Clay. Cassius Clay was an English name of an abolitionist, that is someone who tried to end slavery. But Cassius Clay knew so little about Islam that he changed his name to two slaveholders, Muhammad and Ali. So we see that people do strange things because of their ignorance. And I'm a former teacher, and what I try to do is to make people aware of the facts of the matter and use fact-based reasoning.
Okay, you also, not only you've dealt with slavery, you also dealt with how it affects women. Then you have dealt in detail about how the infidels get a taste of Islam. Would you like to elaborate that a little bit?
Could you repeat your question?
In your series, A Taste of Islam, you have looked at various people who are affected by Islam, right?
Yes.
And one of the categories, of course, is women. You talked about it. And another interesting category is the infidels. How the infidels, the non-believers, are affected by Islam.
Well, of course, that's all I care about is how we're treated. If a Muslim, I'm not anti-Muslim. If you'll notice something else here, I'm not talking about Muslims. Who I talk about is the doctrine of Islam. I don't talk about people. And also, I don't draw conclusions. As when I told you the story of Muhammad marrying Aisha, I don't draw any conclusions. I find that my audience can leave that up to themselves. So the kafir is the person who I'm a kafir. You're a kafir. And so everything I write is for us because we're the victims of Islam. Although I like to say also that the first victim of Islam is the Muslim themselves.
Okay, that's right. One of the most interesting books that I find is one in which you teach how to persuade Muslims out of Islam.
Yes. What happens is that I'm fairly well known. And so I get people sending me questions about how to debate with somebody about Islam. And I get people who attack me. And one day I was reading an attack on me and I said, you know what? These arguments, there's only so many of them. There's a few dozen of them. And so I decided to write a book in which all the arguments that I'd heard about Islam were put down so that people aren't coming up with new arguments. So you may as well know the old arguments. And so I wanted to write a book of the arguments and teach people how to reason, use fact-based reasoning, how to apply the doctrine. And so it's an interesting book. I think I've written the only book on how to debate about Islam. But it's important because what happens is when I go to a talk, if I give a talk, and due to COVID, I don't give many talks anymore. But when I do, when the Muslim stands up in the audience to ask a question, it's the same question I've heard time and time again. I realized there were no new questions. It turns out there are a few, but basically there's no new questions. And so I wrote a book on here's what they're going to do. It's sort of like in a sports game. If you study the game films of your enemy, because he's going to play the next game pretty much like he played the last one. So anyway, a factual persuasion, which is, of course, my entire philosophy. I try to persuade with facts. How many facts have I given you in this brief interview? And I want other people to give facts. Our civilization is based on ethical treatment of others and critical thought. And we're seeing that critical thought is being driven out of the marketplace of ideas. And yet I'm a scientist, and I truly believe in critical thought, fact-based reasoning. That's all I'm about. And I want to teach other people how to do this, because it is a shame and a tragedy. But in the United States, schools less and less teach anything about critical thought and reasoning. They become ideologues. They have an ideology which they're selling, and you better give them their ideas back on a test, or you will not pass. As a matter of fact, it is possible with what's being done in our textbooks, that to give the right answer would give you the wrong score. So this is a tragedy, because once we give up on fact-based reasoning, all we're left with is emotion and passion, which is not a good way to run your life.
Now, I'm going to ask you the last question from my side, and I request all my viewers to please send your questions. We will take questions after this. My last question is that the interesting phenomenon in the practical world that we find today is that the ideology of the left and the ideology of Islam, they seem to supplement each other very well these days. Whereas there is very little common with them, because the left actually prides itself on what it calls objectivity. Of course, we know there's a lot of dogma there as well. How do they manage to get on together?
Well, for one thing, we have a saying in America: politics makes strange bedfellows. That is, under politics, you may wind up being in the same position as someone that you wouldn't normally think. Most Muslims in America vote Democrat. But the important point here, I think, is this: the left is totalitarian in its nature. That is, it wants full control of everything, including family life. Well, Islam agrees with that. And Islam agrees that they both agree that the civilization that we have should be torn down and a utopia be rebuilt. Now, the left thinks they can work with the Muslims and help tear down American society or Indian society, and that they'll be fine when it is over. What they will discover is what the communists did in Iran. Before Khomeini came, I've lost my train of thought before. Before Khomeini came, he was brought in mainly by the left, the Tudor party.
Yeah.
After the Tudor party brought Khomeini to power, 5 days later, Khomeini issued death warrants for all the Tudor party leaders. My point is this: the left does not know any history because they're utopians. They don't care anything about history. Idealists care nothing about history. Utopians care nothing about history because their new vision is so vast, so great, and so beautiful. It's never been done before. So they share this. They're both utopian systems. They're both totalitarian in nature, and they both want to tear down a civilization. The left thinks they've got good buddies with the Muslims, but they will discover what the Tudor party did, which was once the Muslims take power, they don't have any friends.
Yeah, quite right. I think that's beautifully explained. Two totalitarian systems complementing each other. So on this note, we move to the audience. I request all my viewers to please ask your questions. Please like this video, share it around, subscribe the channel. Also, press the bell icon so that you get your notifications. And we survive on your support and contribution. So do consider that as well. Let's move to the questions and answers.
Press the bell icon on YouTube and don't miss another update.
Saru, what do you think about Minneapolis Muslim Majority Council? How do we create Muslim atheists?
Could you give the question again?
What do you think about Minneapolis Muslim Majority Council? How do we create Muslim atheist?
How you create a Muslim atheist is quite simple. You explain to them what their religion and philosophy is. You explain to them what Islam is, and ask them if they agree with that. So, you may get an atheist, but they may not speak. It is estimated in the United States that 1 Muslim in 4 is an apostate. That is, they have left the religion, but they don't do anything about it, because being a Muslim is far more than being an individual. It's being a member of the ummah, the group. And so therefore the group is very powerful. And once you leave Islam, you lose your friends, you lose your business associates, you lose your family. So that part is difficult. But to make a Muslim atheist, you have to explain to him what his current religion and philosophy is. That is, you need to explain to them what is it, what is really Islam. Do you really believe that you should beat your wife? Do you really believe that you should marry children? Do you really believe this? Do you really believe? Just go through the points of doctrine and find out if they believe this or not. Or at least I have found that through my experience that creates the most doubt. And the first thing you want to do is to create doubt. So
right.
my solution to everything is facts about Islam.
Quite right. I can advise all my viewers to go to Dr. Bill Warner's Amazon page. It's available on Amazon India as well as on Amazon.com. And you can find all his work over there. And all the books that he's talking about, they're all there. Okay, question to guest. If we start boycotting Muslims, will it help reducing their radicalization or will it increase it?
I say it's important to do it, whether no matter what it does. Kafirs sit around and worry, but don't do and do and do. If I make myself clear, that is, at least if you're boycotting, you're doing something and you're not a total victim. You're not a total dhimmi. So I have no idea what the reaction would be to boycotting, but I think it's, as long as it's legal and a social pressure, I think it's a good thing to do. And that's the same thing with boycotting. Whether it'll have the effect you intend or not, I don't know, nor can I predict the outcome. But at least you as a kafir will have done something. One of the things that it happens to me when I talk with people about Islam is they're so depressed. They don't have any enthusiasm. They feel like, oh, everything is lost. Well, what the problem is, it is not that Islam is such a good winner, it's that we're such bad losers. We're the problem. The Muslims are not the problem. If we did everything right and did it, for instance, going back to the partition of India, if that had been done with any kind of common sense knowledge of what the doctrine of Islam is, it would never happen. It was one of Gandhi's biggest mistakes. I hope I haven't offended anybody there. But Gandhi was totally wrong about this. And why? He didn't really understand Islam. He knew some nice Muslims who he referred to as his brothers, but they were not his brothers. He was a kafir and they're Muslims and their jihad worked. So study, know Islam, and make sure that Muslims know Islam as well.
Yeah, you're quite right. Of course, I've written a whole book about how the partition happened. And I have criticized Gandhi as well. Viral Patel, Doctor, you mentioned the golden rule, which we are aware of, but then how come such a powerful nation like the US allows mosques destroying that rule 5 times a day?
Because we want to be nice. The United States is consumed with the cancer of nice. Everyone wants to be nice. No one wants to offend anybody. As a matter of fact, the term racism, for instance, no longer has any meaning. It just means a certain group has been offended. So we're letting them do this because we're fools. We think if we're nice, that they'll change. Islam hasn't changed in 1,400 years, and it won't change in another 1,400 years. It is unchangeable. That is the way it is, the thought system it is designed. So we let them violate the rule. We let them violate a lot of rules. For instance, when they run for office, which they're now Congress people, and there's not a senator yet, but we have attorney generals that are Muslim. No one, while they're running for office, even asks them about their political doctrine. They never ask them about political Islam, how the doctrine of Islam contradicts the Constitution of the United States. They don't want to do that because they would offend somebody. Well, let me tell you, sir, I have offended a lot of people, but I offended them with the facts and truth and not with lies and screaming, just cold facts. So we're there. Whatever Muslim want, Muslim get, because no matter who it is, Jew, Christian, atheist, they always, whatever the Muslim wants, they get, and they get no pushback. Again, it is not that Islam is such a winner, but we're such losers. We've lost in America, we have an expression called backbone. I don't know if you have a similar expression in India or not. Anyway, we no longer have a backbone.
Quite right. That's the backbone problem is probably universal. Thank you, Manoj Lama, for your contribution. Thank you so much. Thank you very much. Viral Patel again. Dr. Warner, do you think normal Muslim's brain is capable of understanding that if you remove hatred, violence, and sex, there is nothing left in Islam?
Well, again, I don't deal with Muslims and what will happen to them. But it is amazing. If you take jihad, if you take the violence out of Islam and the offensive, what I think are immoral acts, it becomes a very small book. So, well, it just is. It just is. And by the way, Muslims like to make their books artificially big. They substitute complexity for subtlety. But again, whether a normal Muslim's brain is incapable of understanding if you remove hatred, I think what we can only do is deal with the Muslims that we know. And to deal with them, I've never raised my voice. I'm never rude. I never insult. I never condemn. I just want to know, do you know what it is? And so that's my method of working. And I don't think there's such a thing as a normal Muslim's brain, because there's, what, 1.5 million Muslims, 1.5 billion Muslims, and they're different people. They have different ideas, different. Look, I know Muslims that drink beer. I know Muslims that don't ever fast or pray. Now that they're not much of a Muslim, but they call themselves a Muslim. And so they've made their own decisions. This is the reason I stay with the doctrine. The doctrine doesn't shift or move. When you start talking about individuals, who knows? And besides that, there's another subtle thing here. If you never talk about Muslims, you'll never get sued for libel or slander, because you're not dealing with people. You deal with doctrine.
Right. Absolutely. Next one. Krishna Sundar. Namaste, Dr. Warner. Big fan of your work. With the Democrats in power and the military getting woke, do you think US will win the kinetic warfare of jihad?
No. Look, we will not defeat Islam with bullets and bombs. This is an ideological war. We will defeat Islam by knowing its ideology and proving that our ideology is superior to theirs. If it were just bullets and bombs, we could drop a hydrogen bomb on Mecca and be done with the issue. But that's not what we're going to do. So we need to understand that this is a war of ideas, a war of ideologies, not bullets and bombs. So, but it is true that I love this guy is obviously familiar with American English. The Democrats are in power and the military getting woke. Do you think, I'll tell you how well we'll do in kinetic warfare. How long have we been in Afghanistan? We've been in Afghanistan longer, I think, than all the other wars we've been in, all wrapped up. The leader for a while in Afghanistan under Clinton, under Barack Obama, was Stanley McChrystal, who was considered to be a real super warrior. So he wrote a paper on how to win the war in Afghanistan. I got a copy of that paper. It was redacted, so the tactical information was removed, like names, dates, and places. There were 3 words that were not in this document. 3 words were not in this document, and those 3 words missing told you that we were doomed to lose. Those 3 words were jihad, Islam, and Muslim. If you think you can defeat Islam in Afghanistan and not know what jihad means, then you're crazy. You're simply crazy. You're ignorant. You are an ignorant fool. Now you'll notice something. I do not condemn Muslims, but I will condemn Kafirs.
Yes.
So Stanley McChrystal is an ignorant fool. I mean, think about that. You're going to defeat Islam in kinetic warfare, and yet you don't even know what the doctrine is. If you live like a loser and play like a loser, you're a loser.
Okay, right. Next one. Joyjeet. Namaskar. In the recent PM Modi event in Houston, lots of Khalistanis protested with assembling points as mosques. How do you observe the rise of Islamists in the US?
Well, I don't use the term Islamist. There's only one Islam. There's not two Islams. There's not a good Islam, a bad Islam. There's not a peaceful Islam and a warlike Islam. There's only one Islam. So therefore, I don't use the term Islamist. Every Muslim who's a real Muslim believes that the Quran and the Sunnah of Muhammad should judge everything and give guidance in all matters. So that's somewhat what an Islamist is supposed to do, but no, an Islamist is simply a devout Muslim. So what I talk about is the doctrine and how much of it they adhere to. But I do not use terms like Islamist. Now then, how do you observe the rise? Well, let me rephrase this. How do I observe the rise of political Islam in the United States? I'm horrified not because they're so good, but because we refuse to engage them. Like I say, when they run for governor, no one stands up and says, how do you feel about wife beating, which your religion includes? We are losing because we will not fight. We're trying to be nice. So I feel very bad about it because we are choosing to be losers. Again, who do I condemn? Do I condemn the Muslims for winning? No. As a matter of fact, I'm somewhat a fan of the Muslims who win. That's a strange thing to say. But if you have an enemy, you need to study your enemy and know what makes him strong and know what makes him weak. You need to know what he thinks is precious, which brings that's from Sun Tzu's Art of War. What is precious to Islam is the life of Muhammad. So any insults to Muhammad are worse than kinetic warfare. For instance, in China, they will never defeat the Uyghurs by simply persecuting them. Because once the Chinese become weak, they'll bounce right back. The way you deal with Islam is it's an idea. So what you do is you tell Muhammad jokes, and if you want to deal with the Uyghurs, because that they can't stand. But brutality, they can understand that. And their doctrine includes being brutally treated and then coming back to win again. They're infinitely patient. One of the reasons that we're being defeated by political Islam in the United States is we measure time by a watch. Islam measures time by a calendar. Okay? They have infinitely long patience. And we want to do it now. And we're doing it wrong. Again, notice, I do not criticize Muslims. I criticize us.
Yes. Krishna says to Dr. Warner, even after centuries of molestation, why do kafirs still want to get molested? Is it fear, shame, dualistic ethics, logic, masochism, or Stockholm syndrome, or a combination of the above?
I've said this. I'm an 80-year-old man. My grandmother who raised me lived to be 100. If you had tried to invade America in the days when my grandmother was a teenager, you didn't stand a chance because people were forthright and told the truth. Instead, we've become a nation of liars in which we're all very nice. We don't offend anybody. That's no way to lead a life. If you want to introduce me to a person, I want to know two things about him. Who are his friends and who are his enemies? And if he has only friends and no enemies, I'm not interested in meeting the man because it's enemies that measure the man. And we're living in a world in which we don't want to have any enemies. So I think what we're seeing here is the decay of Western thought. That's what I think we're seeing here. That's the background. And look, in our society, the police don't know anything about Islam. The lawyers don't know anything about Islam. The army doesn't know. The universities don't know. All of our knowledge about Islam is based on wishes and just hopes, and we're no longer able to fully engage. There's a word I will use, which I don't think will translate to any English in India, but we're wusses. We're wimps. We don't have a backbone. Again, notice I'm not criticizing Muslims. They have plenty of backbone. The Muslims play to win and we play to tie. How's that going to work out?
Okay. Abhishek, Dr. Warner, are the number of Hindus killed by Islam between 1500 and 1947 AD close to 80 million? Or is it 120 million according to you?
Okay. This is from my Tears of Jihad analysis. One of the things as a scientist that struck me, hold on. One of the things that struck me when I started studying Islam, sorry, was how little was known about it and how little was cared. I measure this with the question. People can tell you how many people Mao Zedong killed. People can tell you how many people Stalin killed. People can tell you how many Hitler killed. But I said, no one's even asked the question, how many has this jihad killed over 1,400 years? And I call this the tears of jihad. These numbers are rough. I estimate as rough estimates. 80 million Hindus, 120 million Africans, 60 million Christians, and 10 million Buddhists. Now then, are these figures accurate? No, they're rough ideas. But what is important here is no one else even wants to know the answer to the question, because the answer is not zero. And so why is it for 1,400 years it took a scientist to come along and ask a simple question? How many people have died in jihad over 1,400 years? That's an obvious question. We've asked it about everybody else. Pol Pot, we know how many he killed. So that's the problem. I had to ask the question. So many things that I've done, for instance, my simple Quran, which is easy to read, should have been done years and years and years ago, because everything that I've done is obvious. So the idea of using the word kafir instead of non-believer. The reason I use the word kafir is it's the word that the Quran uses for us, and it irritates Muslims when you do it. They tell me, oh, no, you're not a kafir. Yes, I am.
Yeah. Well, kafir has a certain insulting tone to it, which non-believer doesn't have.
Right. But if you have an insulting name for me, I'll use it for myself. It takes part of the strength away.
Okay. Next question is, can Vedic culture provide the solution?
I think so. I think any culture, can give a solution if it understands that it's part of a civilization that's important and it needs to be defended. So Vedic, Christian, Jewish, atheist. Look, atheists in America say all religions are bad. And so therefore they think that Muslims don't care anything about them. Muslims despise atheists more than they do anybody else.
Exactly. Apostates and atheists, they are topmost.
Yes.
Vijay Nair, Dr. Warner, I'm a big fan. Glad to see you on Jaipur Dialogues. What's your opinion of Biden-Harris? Will they help realize Obama's jihad dream of turning America into Darul Islam?
Yes, they will gladly do it. They don't understand what it will be. I've already told you once, I'm an 80-year-old man. I've never seen politics in America be at such a low level. My heart weeps.
Ravi Mishra, is polygamy a great incentive for Westerners to convert to Islam without knowing anything about Islam?
It could be. I'll tell you this. In America, many women marry Muslims for the following reason. Many people now in America don't get married. They just live with the woman and the man. But for marriage, many women want marriage, and so they can go to Islam. If they convert to Islam, they will be able to get a husband who will support them. Now, he can beat them, but he can support them, and he's not supposed to fool around with other women. So therefore, one reason for joining Islam is so you can get a husband. So in America, 70% of all black people do not have a father in the house. But if you become a Muslim, you will have a father in the house. So it solves some problems. Now, by the way, in terms of having a harem or a large number living with Muhammad, I think had 11, but I've been married for over 60 years. I have found that one wife has been enough. As a matter of fact, a whole bunch of them I couldn't keep up with.
Ravi Mishra. Okay, this question is done. Next one.
Sorry.
Hello, Dr. Warner. It's a pleasure watching you in Jaipur Dialogues. Is it possible to deal with political Islam politically and democratically?
Yes, it is. That's what I want to do. That is my goal. I do not call for armed warfare. I call for the warfare of ideas. But we have to have, first off, we need to know what our ideas are, and we need to know what Islam's ideas are. And that is the way to do it, I keep coming back to this. It's about educating yourself and then going to Islam and telling them the facts of the matter. and we need to demand that our own people, for instance, or we should demand that our own mayor understand something about what the Islam deals with in terms of what in this town and its constitution. So it is possible to deal with political Islam politically and democratically if you have knowledge. See, I keep coming back to that. You got to know your enemy.
Right. Next one. Okay, Mr. Warner, are you blamed by Islamists for being a murtad? Murtad means apostate. If so, do these Islamists ever threaten your life? How do you deal with such challenges?
This is an interesting question. I made a video one time that was 45 minutes long called Why We Are Afraid. The reason I titled it that was people used to ask me all the time, aren't you afraid of being killed? You've seen my method of reasoning. I never insult. I never call names. I've never been threatened. I've been called a hater, a racist, a bigot, and an Islamophobe, but I have never had my life threatened or anything like that. And the reason is I treat a Muslim with respect. I don't make fun of them. I don't mock them. And so therefore, I don't get any threats. I treat a Muslim as I would be treated.
Right. Praveen, great work. Please have more such sessions in English, especially on the new JD US platform. So actually, we have also inaugurated a Jaipur Dialogues edition in the US to coincide with the United States time zones. That is actually the videos have yet to start. That's what he's referring to. Raghu, namaste, Mr. Will Warner. If there is no faculty of dialectics in Islam, how can there ever be peaceful resolution via dialogue? Isn't violence inevitable here?
I don't think it's inevitable. I think it's going to happen because there's a doctrine of jihad, which means that kafirs can be killed. Then that doctrine will never go away. So there's always some threat. But I just tell you that those who have used my methods, that is, of dealing with the facts of Islam and not insulting them as a Muslim, weaken their position. It may take some time. I'm an optimist. I believe it's a problem of ideas and that we can use the right ideas to get out of the problem. So call me foolish, but I am an optimist. I think it'll work. But you have to arm yourself with the facts of the matter. I keep coming back to that. Good wishes and fear don't play a part in this plan.
Right. Next. Krishna Sundar, in terms of critical thinking, how are Muslim students different from Kafir students during your time in the terribly slow university?
This is somebody from America. Well, let me talk about not just students, but life. Islam believes that all answers to all questions, including those in physics and math, are found in the Quran, the Shari'a, and the Hadith. That is, Islam thinks in a very small box, and it can't go beyond that box. So therefore, this is the reason that the critical thought is not allowed in Islam. Only authoritarian thought is allowed. So what this means is that there have been almost no Muslims who have won not an Academy Award, a Nobel Prize in science, because they do not believe in laws of nature. They do not believe in cause and effect, because Islam denies cause and effect. So therefore, as a science student, if you're to be really working in science, you have to be violating what your basic beliefs are, because you believe there's truth outside of the Quran, the Shari'a, and the Hadith. But it is interesting that how few books are published in Arabic, because there's no need for books that aren't written in Arabic, other than if it's a manual on how to fix a car or something. But Islam is not greatly interested in ideas outside of Islam, because they're told from the time they're a child that Islam has all the answers. So therefore, a Muslim student, as much as they believe this doctrine, don't do well in the sciences. And I think this is borne out by statistical facts.
Right. Satish Das, Warner sir, is there any Islamic atheist woman Whoever fell in love with you? That's a personal question.
Not that I'm aware of. I've been asked a lot of questions. I've never been asked that question before.
So that's the fun of coming to Jaipur Dialogues, I guess. Abhishek, why was Islam not dominant throughout most of the 20th century? Or is it just that other events and major changes in the world kept it from gaining attention?
Well, the reason is that the evil colonialists of Europe, dominated the Sharia law application in Islam. So that's the reason. Look, without Muhammad was a businessman until he became a Muslim. Then he became a thief. By that I mean he lived off of waging war and taking the profits of war. So therefore, I lost my train of thought. Doop-a-doop. Let me regain it here. Okay, the military power, we dominated their governments is what we did, and so that changed it. Now what has happened is with the rise in oil and the rise also of the Muslim Brotherhood, which said that we must regain our strength. The Muslim Brotherhood, by the way, is a very powerful organization. It's very real, and we can learn a lot by studying from them. But it was the colonialism that weakened Islam, and now then, the Europeans are holding their backsides and crying about the fact they were colonialists. And as Hindus, you may have a special issue with this. But at one time, the United States and Europe felt like they were world beaters. And now then we don't have that attitude at all anymore.
Okay. Archit, is love jihad oblique grooming gangs active in the USA as well?
Of course. Why? It worked in England, so it'll work in the United States.
Yeah, obviously, all you need to have a few zimmis around. That's all. Rohit Sachan, do you think loss of Western culture and social values like family is helping Islamists to spread in Western countries?
Yes. Shortest answer I can give. Yes, I do. The loss of family, I'm a big believer in. By the way, Islam has some things I agree with. They say that the family is the basis of civilization. I agree with them. Not the individual, but the family. I want to point this out. I'm not some hater who hates everything about Islam. There are some things, for instance, I enjoy the way they treat their elders. In the United States now, the young are quite rude to old people sometimes. But Muslims, even if you're a kafir and you're old, they will treat you with respect. So there are some things about Islam. I'm not some sort of wild, crazy guy who thinks that there's nothing good to be found in Islam at all. Also, their sense of community. Now, how they do that, I don't like, but anyway.
Okay, Anshul, in India and in some European countries, we have right-leaning governments. Then why the banning of Islamic symbols like burqa, hijab, halal food, etc., doesn't get many takers, despite us having a majority of around 80% or more?
Well, we let the Muslims do what they want to do because they ask us, and we keep coming back to the fact we're too weak to say no. That's the problem. It's interesting. When I first started doing this work, and going back to the question of, aren't you afraid? A Coptic Christian said to me one time, he said, you're safe for several reasons. Number one, you don't insult and you never threaten. The fact is, you stand up and say what you believe, and says Muslims respect strength, not weakness. So therefore, he says, you project strength. And besides that, he said it'd cause more political problems than it would be worth. But I thought it was interesting that he said, because you don't harm people, you don't condemn people, but you say exactly what you think. He said you get respect from Muslims the Muslim is to respect only one thing from the kafir, only one thing, and that is strength. And he says you sow strength, and so therefore you get respect.
Okay, that's something to learn from you. Rakesh Ori, Dr. Warner, you said Islam in US is not challenged because Americans are nice. I think there has to be more than that, because American politicians and academia are not being nice to Hindus who have done them no harm.
Yes, but you're not threatening us. You're not a problem. And by the way, I'm somewhat sensitive to the fact that Hinduism is not well taught in the United States university systems. As a matter of fact, in some places, the Hindu department has been replaced by leftists.
Yes, that's unfortunate, but true. Correct. Next one. Ravi Mishra, thanks for the beautiful answer to my previous question. Has Islam become the backbone of US democracy?
No. Look, first off, we need to understand something. Islam is not compatible with democracy at all, because the kafir is inferior in every way to the Muslim. So therefore, a democracy means that the kafir has as strong a voice as the Muslim does. So democracy does not work with Islam, period. All that works with Islam is totalitarianism, the strong leader, the strong man. And that's the example of Muhammad. He was the strong man, and so that's the only model for a leader.
Okay. Nikhil, what happened to political Islam in Myanmar? What is fate in India in future?
Well, it's easy to predict the future. If you don't change anything, it'll just be a repetition of the past. So therefore, I would say what's been happening in the past will continue to happen until we decide to change it.
Got that. That's very beautifully put. So thank you, Dr. Warner. We've come to the end of our questions and answer. Okay, there's one last minute question. What sort of response do you hear from the governments?
Ha! They don't want to know who I am. I mean, I'm considered a bad person in a lot of people in the United States because I stand up and I speak the truth. So they don't want to hear about me. Let me give you an example. We had a new governor who was a Republican, conservative, elected governor. When he needed to train the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation, he didn't call on me, he called on the Muslim Brotherhood. It's true. The Muslim Brotherhood can get a meeting with any politician. I can't get a meeting with any of them. They don't want to be seen in the same room with me. And all I do is what I've done here. I mean, you've seen the worst of me on this interview program.
Sorry, we have or we haven't?
We have. I mean, this is as bad as I get. And yet people say I don't want to be anywhere near him.
Okay.
It's funny to be an 80-year-old man and scare people.
It's the idea. It's the idea that scares people. Okay, so I think, do we have a few more last minute questions? If they have, you please flash them, otherwise we close it. Satish Das Warner, sir, a bit more serious one. Have you ever encountered Muslims, atheists asking you to prove Atma?
No.
Okay. Anshul, is the guilt conscience of Europe for the colonial times and pre-World War era the reason for their timidity towards Islam?
Yes. See, I'm able to give short answers too.
Yes, certainly. Because we are over our time now, so I think it's time to close. So thank you very much, Dr. Warner. We've had a wonderful interaction with you. Thank you, all viewers. You have been very, very forthcoming, and you asked some really good questions, and which I can see that Dr. Warner also enjoyed answering those questions. So thank you for that. A very good night from here, and a good day to you, Dr. Warner.
Thank you very much. I love what you're doing. Keep doing it.
Thank you, Dr. Warner, and we hope to have you more often in the future.
As long as I can talk about my favorite subject.
Oh, of course. Your favorite subject is also our favorite subject.
Okay. So. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye. Thank you.
Press the bell icon on YouTube and don't miss